Tag Heuer is back, or pretty close anyway. Some of you might say that they never left, but for many, Tag Heuer have been in the doghouse, orologically speaking, for quite a while. I too have been guilty of ignoring them, relegating them to one of those not kosher kind of brands within the broader watch community. But I think that's a mistake, on my own part and also on the part of many in the community. Honestly, I think they're back. Why? Well, let's dive in. Very long story short, there was Heuer back in the day. This is the brand we collectively have chosen to give our seal of approval. Then, back in the last century, Tag comes into the picture, buys Heuer, and Tag Heuer fell into disregard. There were a lot of things that weren't great about Tag Heuer for the longest time. Their marketing was brash, it was domineering and almost Hublot-esque before Hublot was peak Hublot. Their products were a mixed bag at best, also because they were in all sorts of price ranges, they had generic mass market movements and even quartz movements. You name it, if there was a theme or a topic that watch enthusiasts held dear, Tag Heuer likely stepped over the line in their minds several times. Personally, I wasn't really in the watch scene 20 or 30 years back, so I lean a lot on what is written and said by others, but I do have this overarching hypothesis that explains it to me. Back in the 90s, selling out was something that was frowned upon. Whether you were a heavy metal band or an author, fans had this weirdly oppositional position of they wanted the thing they were fans of to keep things real by staying true to the art and not selling out. The counterculture generally in the late 80s and 90s and up to at least the 2000s frowned upon becoming too commercial because that was dishonest, inauthentic, not real. I think in some ways Tag fell prey to a similar kind of sentiment, especially when good in-house movements were discarded instead for easily mass-produced sourced movements, especially where sales and volume sales were prioritized over niche product launches. Tag Heuer sold what worked and some people took offense. It didn't really hurt Tag Heuer. They are currently the 9th largest watch manufacturer in Switzerland, according to the Morgan Stanley report. But the tastemakers shunned Tag Heuer. Tag Heuer really is a weird brand and very few other watchmakers are like them. This all boils down to the simple fact that Tag Heuer sells almost everything to anybody. Rolex is luxury. All products are quality-wise more or less identical. The movements are all in-house. The pricing starts fairly high and does continue into the hundreds of thousands when precious metals get introduced. But generally there is only one quality standard for a Rolex watch, and watches of similar materials, well, they all inhabit a very narrow price point. Same goes for Richard Mille or Tudor or JLC or Longines or Tissot. Richard Mille is expensive, Tissot is cheap. Swatch is cheap, Blancpain is expensive. Christopher Ward is cheap, MB&F is expensive. But not Tag. Who else like Tag make both $1,500 watches as their cheapest and a $350,000 tourbillon watch as their most expensive? The only brand that I can think of that is remotely similar is Seiko, and even they separate their high-end into separate brands like Grand Seiko. On top of all that, Tag makes its own tourbillons, in-house movements, but also sources movements, uses quartz, and to top it all off, they sell smartwatches. Almost any marketing professional would likely come to the conclusion that this is a mistake. If you want to inhabit different price points with different qualities, you go for different brands under an umbrella. Mercedes has uber luxury in the Maybach brand. Not necessarily super successful, but they've kept the core Mercedes brand in its narrow lane, as it were. Not Tag. They've got cheap, mid-range, uber expensive, plus smartwatches, all in one. This should be a recipe for disaster, but clearly it doesn't seem to be. The answer is simple: good products. Specifically 3 types of good products. Before we get to what they are, I'll just touch on what they're not. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think smartwatches are a good business decision. End of story. There is one brand that has a relevant all-round smartwatch, and that's Apple. The Tag does not even come close. Then there are the specialist smartwatches. Tag has a golf function as one of its key selling points, but there are 2 other brands that dominate the specialist smartwatch space: Garmin and Suunto. There are others. Casio is trying to get on the action, but Tag just doesn't have an option that is competitive in terms of pricing or technology, in my opinion. It's also not their tourbillons and their high-end creations. They are not and will not anytime soon have the cachet that Richard Mille or even Hublot have in terms of making ultra-wild, ultra-high price creations. It's cool to some degree that they are capable of creating some of these watches, but generally I tend to think they get met with a meh from the enthusiasts and the uber-rich alike. There may be 1 or 2 exceptions to the rule, as it were, but generally I do believe that's the case. Now, the 3 types of watches. It's a little bit overpriced, yes. Close to $4,000 for a Sellita watch is on the very expensive side. The Caliber 5 inside is essentially a sourced Sellita or ETA movement that you can find in Christopher Ward's and Sins for under $2,000. There are different grades of Sellitas and there can be some differences, but I don't think it radically changes the position I have that it's on the expensive side. But this is a dive watch with 300 meters of water resistance. It has a solid bracelet with an easy adjust mechanism. It has some intricate case finishing that makes it look premium. And it looks good. It's a very nice watch. 3.5K is, as I said, expensive, but honestly, for a non-watch enthusiast, it's not too bad. It's not a Hublot that sells the same movement for $8,000. An Oris Aquis 36mm with the Sellita movement sells for maybe $700-800 less. That's definitely cheaper, but Tag gets away with it because their brand commands a little bit more mainstream cachet. Would I personally buy it at this price? Absolutely not. But it's a good enough, very well made and good looking offering that a lot of people will like. And it's not a mall watch. It looks like a serious watch. They have more and more of these kind of offerings in their collection. Then they have the icon, the Monaco. I'm unsure as to how many square watches get sold these days, but with a lug-to-lug of 47.5-ish millimeters, it's not like it's completely unwearable. Square watches wear big, and this watch has a height of 14.35 millimeters, so it is a big boy. It's a very big boy actually, but it's an icon, and there's the whole backstory that goes with it. This watch has never really left the Tag Heuer lineup throughout the years. It's a mainstay, and at Tag's perceived worst, it was still there, giving watch enthusiasts hope that Tag Heuer might return to their former glory. Until now, though, it has for quite a while stood alone among aqua races and quartz Formula Ones and fairly basically perceived Carreras. Until recently, at least. The reissues, the reimaginations, the reinventions, the glass box, the skipper, the Octavia. Tag Heuer hasn't done anything particularly unique. Seiko has dived into their back catalogue and dug out watches like the 62 MAS. Tudor digs out the 7922 and renames it the Black Bay 54, and Glashütte relaunched the Spesimatic as the CQ. In some ways, though, it's more significant for Tag Heuer because they are diving into that back catalogue of Heuer watches. The Skipper, the Octavia, are not only in part recreations or reimaginings or whatever you want to call them, but they are also really, really good-looking, well-made watches. Diving into your back catalogue does not guarantee you a smash hit, but Tag Heuer have been relatively consistent. New models like the glass box. Everybody loves the Skipper, everybody loves the Octavia. Or a lot do at least. I know some people in the comments sometimes take me saying everybody as to be understood literally. That's not the case, of course. But they are popular because they're historically significant to varying extents, and they are just plain good looking. You've got an all-round good diver, which may be a little bit badly spec'd and overpriced, but it's very good looking and broadly appealing. It doesn't have a lot of more watch baggage, and with the versions like the Solargraph, the watch enthusiasts reluctantly nod, ever so slightly, of course, in its direction. The Monaco doesn't stand alone anymore. Where the enthusiasts before could proclaim, yeah, but it's all they have, now it stands together with other good options. A variety of serious offerings that the nerdier crowd, again, ever so carefully nods in approval of. And finally, you have absolute knock-it-out-of-the-park watches like the Skipper. In-house movement, excellent design, original creation with excellent wearability and sizing in line with contemporary expectations. That's a recipe for success. Things are not perfect. Tag Heuer still commands a premium, which in line with someone like a JLC is not ideal. We all know that watch prices have gone a bit bananas of late, but Tag Heuer is one of the ones that are pushing the envelope the most. Having said that though, their offerings like the Skipper are good enough that I think a lot of enthusiasts are willing to begrudgingly pull that MasterCard out of their back pockets to get a hold of that Skipper or Octavia. They're that good, like it or not. Which brings me to what's in store for the future of Tag Heuer. Are watches like the Octavia, the Skipper and the Aqua Racer a sign of Tag Heuer cleaning up their lineup and moving out of the mall counters and going upscale into a more premium space? Yes and no. You never know about smartwatches. They might kill off that product line, but I don't see Tag moving out of the everywhere to everyone brand space. I think they've concluded that they can do both. Sell broadly appealing mass market offerings with not top of the line components on the one hand, and sell vintage, iconic and more luxury serious watches on the other. Their lower end, I think, is going to come under pressure from the likes of Tudor, Longines, Christopher Ward and many others. The general market trend towards watches moving upwards in the luxury space is also going to push Tag Heuer's lower end offerings, but I don't see them phasing anything out in the short term. Tag Heuer is going to do what practically nobody else does, and inhabit a very broad space. I was thinking of how to visualize this in some sort of metaphor or analogy, and the one that kept coming to mind was that Tag Heuer is kind of like the Batman franchise. Not in the sense that they protect us from the bad guys, but in the sense that Batman, the movies and the TV shows, include everything from the hyper-campy 60s TV shows, the Joel Schumacher, all nipples, Arnold Schwarzenegger parodies on the one hand, to iconic film noir-esque Tim Burton, Jack Nicholson movies and brooding Christopher Nolan or Dark Knight opuses. The Batman franchise as a whole is that entire spectrum. I know which ones of those movies I enjoy, and I watch them no matter the fact that the bad Batman movies also exist. Same with Tag. Tag is still going to have some watches in the catalogue that many are going to despise and look down upon. Tag Heuer may still have a marketing that rubs some people the wrong way. But then there's the Autavia and the Skipper and the Monaco, and they're good, so we accept it. And also, Tag is back for another reason. Back in the 90s, like I said, selling out was a bad thing. Fans couldn't live with the contradiction that was being a real as a musician on one hand and being rich and famous on the other. It was inauthentic. We chastised stars for doing that Coca-Cola or Pepsi commercial. We felt it reeked of inauthenticity. But that's not the reality today. Today, two things dominate. One, getting paid is not a bad thing. We have societally accepted that making money is okay, and being Coldplay, The Weeknd, Taylor Swift, Tag, Rolex, Hublot, or Patek, or whoever, they're all in it to make money. There's no lack of or loss of virtue in being in it for the money as such. And then I think most importantly, there's a culture towards personal expression, personal choice, individuality, and freedom. Tastemakers, those that tell you what is right to buy or wrong to buy, are not in vogue. If I like a Hublot and we ignore for a moment Nico Leonard, most people will say, you do you. Not as a pejorative, but as a statement. Freedom to do as you see fit. Wear what you want to wear. Do what you want to do. Buy what you want to buy. It's your choice. And Tag Heuer gives you that option. Want a mainstream quartz watch? You can have that. Cool. Want a vintage inspired skipper? You can have that too. Cool as well. Times have changed, and the baggage that others put on Tag's back is no longer anything people care about anymore. And they have some cool watches. So why not buy a Tag? Tell me what you think in the comments. And no matter what, you do you. Like, subscribe. Cheers.